Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, Chris, how do you say your last name?
Kotsakis.
Kotsakis.
It's a Greek, one of those Greek names.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So you are Greek, right?
I am 100% Greek.
Oh, really?
I like your name, Don Victor. It sounds like one of the Dons of California from Zorro.
from Zorro. Nice.
Hey, where is Don Alejandro and Don Victor?
It's funny you say that, man, because a few years ago,
Spanish nobles.
Well, actually, yes. I'll tell you, there was a noble. His name was Don Felipe de Castro,
Mm-hmm.
and he has our family's, my mother's side's last name, de Castro, and he comes from the same region of Spain, a place called Galicia, that we come from. And it's crazy. I saw a sculpture of him because he was a sculptor, and he looked like a guy version of my aunt, and so it was just like, what the heck?
Yeah, it's amazing the resemblances between ancestors and the genders. It's like I could put a wig on and that would be someone
Exactly. So but his name was. His name wasn't Don, but it was.
Sure.
The title was Don Felipe, and he was brought in by the king. I think it was King Ferdinand,
Mm-hmm.
of Spain, to restore the academy, the Royal Academy, and his focus was anatomy and geometry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it very strange. 300 years later, I'm not 100% sure if we're blood related, but there's a high probability that we are. That here I'm running around the earth digitally, waving the banner of geometry and composition and design and saying that we need to restore this, if you want the glory of art to return.
Right.
So, who knows? With new sciences talking about how embedded in our DNA, you can waken up these ancestral things. It's like, it's kind of cool. But
fantastic. I mean, I have a long lineage with my background in the history. In fact, it will lead into our conversation of what I'm working on. And I could just jump into that if you wanted.
Yeah.
I'm doing concept sketches for a book I'm planning to bring in multiple illustrators and painters, modern illustrators and painters, to depict famous battle scenes of the Greek Revolution of 1821. In 2021, we will have the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution. And it's a very important revolution in terms of European history and how the map changed. You always hear about the Russian Revolution, the American, the British, the French, but some people never even heard of the Greek Revolution. You even have major historical figures from England, like Lord Byron, the poet, who went and fought with the Greeks and died over there. You have a people 400 years when the Ottoman Empire came in and sacked Constantinople, the Greek people became slaves within their own country. So for 400 years, they were under Ottoman Turk occupation. And in 1821, a bishop raised the flag of freedom, and it was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. His mother was a Kotsakis who led the revolution. So I have that direct lineage back to, his name was Theodoros Kolokotronis. And his last name in Greek, Kolokotronis, was more of um, uh, a take on words where they took Kolo and Tronis, which were big rocks,
Mm,
and sit on these rocks and sit like the thinker and
mm,
strategize. So it's very interesting being that I grew up in, this background with both my parents, and on both sides we have great rich histories through our predecessors. But I take great pride in my Greek heritage, and it kind of always led me, with my art. I mean, I started at 4 years old
mm,
drawing Greek mythology. I loved Greek mythology. My mom bought me a coloring book on Greek mythology, and I'm sitting there, and I see this little picture of Pan with the flutes,
mhm,
and I'm going, I don't like it this small. So my father, he was a tobacco sales rep at the time for Philip Morris, and he used to have these big report pads, and they had lines, and it was like ledgers for spreadsheets. I'd flip them over, and I'd use them as my drawing paper. And we're
mm,
going back to 1974, 75. And what I did was visually enlarged Pan 8 times his size and just eyeballed it.
mm,
And I brought it to my mom later, and she was like, "Where did you trace that from?" I said, "I didn't trace this. I just looked at this picture and enlarged it." And then she knew. And there have been artists in the family. She goes, "Oh, he's got the genetic code for the artist." So but she was a theater major herself in the
mm,
arts. So I was very lucky to have a very supportive mother. She got me into private art lessons at a young age. I was one of the better art students in arts, elementary, and I was always the one drawing the posters or doing the
mhm,
stage crew. And it only became natural that I went on to art school, and I had gone the gamut of, I wanted to go to New York, I wanted to go to School of Visual Arts, I wanted to be an artist for Marvel Comics. That was
mm,
my dream, but as I got into college, and I didn't pick the New York schools basically because I kind of was like a very shy kid. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to maneuver walking through the city and talking to people. I actually became an extrovert many years later, and that it's a kind of came out of me. My mom was the same way, very shy, young, became an extrovert, in her 30s. I'm in my late 40s now, but to get back to art school, I picked University Arts, and it gave me a lot of scholarship money. And at
mhm,
the time, it was affordable, yet I would still have money, be going back. And I had the fortune of having several great mentors and instructors.
mm,
One of them being Mike Rossman in my foundation year. He taught us in our drawing class about relationships and relational study of how you create composition, how you create form. Um, he was very much into Leonardo da Vinci, so we learned a lot about, the Vitruvian Man or
mhm,
Vitruvian Man and all the relationships, and that just opened my eyes to figure drawing in a whole different way. I then was studied under Martha Erlbacher, who was a well-known painter out of New York. She was our anatomy teacher,
mm,
and she just opened my. I mean, she was an anatomy um, specialist. Basically, she could be in next to a mortician and point out everything.
mhm,
It's just amazing her lectures, and she was very well known in the arts industry of the art community at the time. And her husband Walter Erlbacher was a well known sculptor, and they actually came out of the School of Abstract Expressionism out of Pratt,
huh,
and they kind of rejected that and went back to uncovering how much they could about realism and realistic painting. And she taught at the New York Academy. She passed away several years ago. I went for a retrospective. But her other student, Renee Fowkes, who is a very well-known painter in the Philadelphia area, she's actually co-chair of painting and drawing the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. We've remained friends through the years. I mean, I was 18 and she was in her 20s when she was an instructor, and She is just a wealth of knowledge. And, you know, anybody that's had her, it's just like you want to sit in there and just be the sponge.
Mhm.
And even at my age, I'm still going to workshops and picking up as much as I can. You're always the student, I say. Once you stop learning, you can't. You really can't stop learning. And we have created I think a society of where people just kind of focus on one aspect. They want to perfect it, and if they can't do that, they kind of shut. They don't keep their mind open. And I've always had that notion of keep an open mind, take constructive criticism. Um, I've taught, I've mentored, and I find there's certain personality types that can really take constructive criticism and use it to a positive instead of a negative.
Mhm.
There's too much negative in the world. I'm the kind of person likes to focus on the positive. We all go through hardships, but you pick yourself up, you dust the dirt off your shoulders, and you move on. Um, if you pick the path of art, it's going to be an enjoyable journey, a difficult journey, but it's so worth it. And I think the journey is more important than the finish, the final product. And that's where I think learning and mentorship comes into place. So getting back to this book, I've been involved, gosh, in the arts, since I graduated. I was a full-time freelance illustrator coming out of art school. I actually turned down a position in New York at Time Magazine as a junior art director. And I said, that's not going to be me. That's not where I see myself being. I want to be an illustrator. So for about 10 to 12 years, I had moderate success at the beginning, working other jobs and such, two and three other, and then things really picked up. And I worked in children's book conceptual design. I worked
Mhm.
in traditional advertising, in agencies, in house as well as freelance, editorial publishing. I actually did promotional work for Marvel and DC back in the day in the mid '90s, more for Fleer and trading cards and things of that nature, but and toy packaging, some things that never saw the light of day. I was working
Mhm.
more as concept art, so my hand was always at drawing. I kept drawing, I kept building my skill. I had the ability for concepting back then to be rather quick and do marker renderings and things like that. Now everything's digital, but I still felt that wasn't me. I always felt I was a painter. Um, and to me, painter and illustrator are synonymous. I mean, and back when I was in art school, I would focus on going back to even before the comic book artists. And this is what I say to young
Mhm.
people: that go back to their influences, go learn about the fathers of American illustration. We have the Brandywine River Museum right here in your backyard. Have you ever
Yeah.
been? No, I haven't. Go see the works of N.C. Wyeth, Maxfield Parrish, Howard Pyle, who's the father of American illustration, J.C. Leyendecker, Christie. Learn about these artists. Learn who their influences are. Keep going back. Learn about how they construct a piece of art. Go back to the old masters. Go back to the Flemish painters. You know, go to the different schools of art, and you will see how there is a lineage and a tradition of training that is brought down. And in today's society, we're not so for we don't have the patron of the arts like we did in the European societies, but we have those remnants. We have those teachings to continue on. A lot of ateliers now that are popping up here and there. And a good friend of mine, we spoke, Neil Carlin. We were students together in undergrad, and he's had the same instructors. He went on to study with Michael Aviano out of the New York Academy of Fine Arts, and Michael is a student of Frank Riley. So you had the Riley method of painting for
Mm.
illustration using the Munsell color charts, and he had a whole movement go there. And we see a lot of um, younger artists now kind of going back to the ateliers because they're not getting taught the basics. Maybe in art school they've dropped foundation year.
Yeah.
They've dropped some of the core value, uh, systems of training for drawing and painting. And I mean, you can do a lot of fancy things on the computer, but if you give someone a stylus and a Cintiq or a tablet to a trained artist, it's amazing to see the difference of what they do than someone just playing around.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying, when you're just playing around, that's not art, but I feel that, as any career or any type of um, craft, you have to hone your skills. And the more you hone your skills, the better the artist you become. And I always said there's a difference between technical skill and being an artist. If everybody says, I need to find my technique, I need to find my style. Well, I had a very uh, well known instructor. He was well known in the film industry for doing the collage paintings like Drew Struzan. In fact, he was a college roommate of his at the Art Center out in LA, Don Daly. And he always said, your technique is the tools you're using. Your style is how you employ that technique, your personal signature. So I think people get too caught up in, I need to find a style in art school. I need to, find a technique. That's a lifelong process of style. That's your personal imprint that's going to be developed over your lifetime and how you grow. And what you might be doing in your 20s as an artist is definitely going to be different than what you're doing in your 40s. And I don't care if you use pastels, digital, oil, that's a technique, that's a tool. And I look at the computer as just another tool. I've gone digital years ago, working in Corel Painter. To me, it's a tool. I don't work as what most artists today work. I still do all my drawings by hand. I'll scan them in. I'll refine things. I'll use the tools as I need them. But there's so many things in the program I would never use or need to use or
Mhm.
try. If I'm experimenting or something. But I think. What we see today is that I see a lot of young people floundering coming out of art school. I don't want to say a lot of people, but they're especially those wanting to get into illustration or fine art. They don't know the avenues to go. So, and we can touch upon this if we talk again later. But we created a conference a few years ago called Artisticon, and it was a colleague of mine who worked as a sculptor for Todd McFarlane Toys. He's worked in comic books and illustration. We became friendly working through an agency. We were actually in the Artist Alley of New York Comic Con, and we had young people coming up to us more so than not asking, how do I break into comics or how do I break into illustration? Like what do I do? I'm actually in art school, but I'm not getting the feedback I need. I'm thinking going to Atelier, which is half the cost, or doing online courses. So what I realized was we need to really push mentorship in this arena, in the comics arena, and I'm sitting there. But what it turned out to be was something far more reaching. When we started to unfold the creation of the conference, we were bringing in fine artists, we were bringing in writers, we were bringing in editors, we were bringing in sculptors, and it became a conference for artists in general,
Mhm.
creators, and how they work together and how they can mentor the younger generation while creating existing connections between them and the community. And it was a glorious 3 days we had back in the late September of 16. And, we had some top names coming in of fine art and comic books and writers. And we're actually having our next show. And I don't want to call it a show, it's an educational conference with a show aspect. We're having it in March of 19. We were going to have one this year, but what happened was our venue fell through. It was another educational institution. And unfortunately, they went through some financial difficulty and the president was let go and things like that. So it kind of set us on a pause path. And I said, okay, let's regroup and rethink this through. And we were lucky enough, due to a professor at Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia, who actually was an attendee and exhibited at Artisticon. He's also president of the Sketch Club, Rich Harrington, and he invited us through the school spoke to the president. They loved the idea. So we're bringing it to Moore College of Art, March 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. We're in the throes of planning this, and it's going to be lectures, demonstrations, portfolio reviews. It's a 3-day, I'd say, boot camp, but not to the point where it's just all hands on. There's enough diversity in there for people who want to learn about writing and illustrating comics or working with an editor.
Mm-hmm.
We've just invited a nonprofit writing group that does comic book promotion for independent authors
Huh.
and artists. So, we had some great people come out. Dave Palumbo was one of our guests of honor, did a 3-hour lecture on photo reference for the illustrator. And that was jam packed. I mean, he's a graduate of the Academy of Fine Arts. His mother's Julie Bell, the famous fantasy artist. His stepfather's Boris Vallejo. His stepbrother's Dorian.
Yeah,
Uh,
Dorian. Hmm.
and he's just a phenomenal painter. Dorian's going to be joining us. In fact, we just sponsored Dorian. That's how we connected
Mm-hmm.
at Rutgers University in Camden. They run a free Comic-Con for the community through Rutgers for the city of Camden, and a lot of it's a depressed urban area, so they're bringing comics and lectures to the public, and we became very good friends with the organizers, and they were part of our Artisticon team, and it's just been a great synergy, and we're bringing in like-minded people that are looking to give back some service. I was at a artist alley in New York called Special. It was a special edition, which creates New York Comic Con. Reed Pop is the parent company. They do San Diego Comic Con. And I went around and I kind of did a survey. And I went to all these different creators. I really handpicked the people I wanted to invite. And the thing that stood out is they were a little bit more seasoned. They were interested in giving back, or they were already teachers. And they saw my vision of how we can bring something that's a little more unique. It's not just a fantasy conference. It's not just a writers conference.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination of it all. And our real focus is on mentorship and helping people at whatever stage in life, whether transitioning from one career to the next, coming out of art school, taking a break from art school, help them on a path to create their art. If they want to be creative entrepreneurs, if they want to be the cog in the wheel, the anchor at Marvel, or they want to be a game designer. We take those aspects, we bring the people in, we bring the professionals, the art directors, and we give them a place to connect. And
When you do that, is that mentorship only happening for those few days at that conference, or does that continue on afterwards?
Well, that's where we're in our infancy. So we're hoping to bring the mentorship on a continual basis and bringing the programming to different conferences. So that's how we brought Dorian.
Okay.
I sponsored Carl Potts, who was an executive editor at Marvel for many years. He mentored Jim Lee. He discovered Jim Lee.
Oh, wow.
And, Jim Lee does a whole forward in the DC Comics visual storytelling guide, sequential storytelling, a whole intro about Carl. And Carl is a very laid back, unassuming guy, but he's done so much. He created Alien Legion through the Eclipse line, which is actually optioned to be a major motion picture through Bruckheimer Films. He did the Punisher War Journal, which they've now based that story arc on the Netflix TV show.
Oh, wow, really? That's cool.
Yeah.
That was a good show.
It was great. So I mean, we bring in the guys that really, and the women that really just see the value in giving back, and we hope to grow the mentorship beyond, like as well as online or courses, and like maybe pop-up events, like a one-day event in this city or that city. So we want to continue. And the thing that I just was so inspired by is the feedback. I had no negative comments. I mean, it was like we're looking at each other like, the camaraderie was crazy. Now, I got to give props to Patrick Wilshire and Jeannie, and you may have, I think I sent you the link. There's a show called IX or LuxCon out in
Hmm.
Reading, Pennsylvania, which I think is close to you.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
at
it's
the
like
Goggle
10 minutes
Workshop.
from me.
Yeah, and you should come out this October. We can meet there. Um, in fact, I'm inviting you to Artisticon right now. So, and our show. So,
Cool.
keep that in mind. So,
Could do a
um,
podcast from there.
yeah, why not? Hey, we are up for anything, and I like thinking outside the box, and which is great
Well,
because
that's what I was going to ask you. Because you said the one venue fell through, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, the one in Reading. That so those are two different conferences. Then
yeah,
one,
LuxCon has been around. They're 11 years now.
and that's for illustrators
Yeah, that's
primarily.
they call it the show of imaginative realism. That's a term that James Gurney coined for fantasy art
Hmm.
um, to give it more of a validity.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and they call it a celebration of imaginative realism, but it's really sci-fi and fantasy artists with some fine artists involved. So what they do is at the Goggle. Have you been to the Goggle Works?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the main show, in the main floor, they have the main showcase of 75 traditional painters. So they're basically trying to hold on to the idea of traditional art selling to collectors.
Hmm.
And they have 4 floors, and then you're juried in. And in the night showcase, they allow digital artists and emerging artists. So there's no separation. And that's where it's like a big party at night.
Hmm. That's cool.
Hobnob and talk. They pull in several hundred people. They started out in Altoona back in 2007. I was at the second one. I was with my wife and my colleague Enrico, and we saw that this was great. And that kind of was always in the back of my head, saying, "I'd like to do something like this." Down in the southern New Jersey, Philadelphia area, but
Hmm.
not just for fantasy or magic realism. I said, I've always liked that kind of art, but I was really big into comics and traditional fine art. I said it'd be cool to come. So that kind of planted the seed. Then I got to know Patrick and Jeannie, and we actually helped hang their show 2 years ago. And then I started sponsoring some programs. So last year we had my attorney, who's not only is he creative, he's a guy with long hair. He's a trademark and IP attorney out
Oh
of
wow.
Maryland, but he's a sound guy. He's done original documentary films. In fact, they just wrapped up Eye of the Beholder, which is they did a documentary, he and his wife and his partner Brian Stillman, about the art of Dungeons and Dragons. So they interviewed
What?
all the artists all the way back. So we're going to be airing that at
Wow.
Artisticon. So it's amazing the people you meet. It's just like this is what I love about it. You're just meeting, and everybody's just so energized and positive, and it's almost like a family. And I loved LuxCon back in 2008. I didn't go back because my mother got ill, then my father got ill. We had a baby, so life got in the way, and we had things to do. But then we kind of got our life back, and the baby was getting older. We went. He was a little boy now. And, I helped hang the show. I reached out to him. Actually, I met Dorian at the Delaware Art Museum. They
Hmm.
did a preview show to promote IX that year. What they did was they brought in several artists, Donato Giancolo. They had Bob Eggleton. I think Jeff Easley was there. Dorian did a painting demo. In fact, I got the painting from the demo because the girl he was using as a model was a young girl working at the museum, and he
Hmm.
gave it to her, and she didn't accept it. And I said, "Excuse me, I'll take that." I paid him for it, but it's like she turned down a painting from Dorian Vallejo, and I was like, "You don't know what you're doing here." It's just she wasn't an artist; she didn't realize. But so we met there, we hit it off. We have a mutual friend, and who actually was the director of the Arts Center where we had our first um, Artisticon.
Hmm.
So, I've kind of created these relationships in the past 5 years. So I've gone on a major tangent off the book I'm working, but it kind of shows you how that book idea came into place. So I'm creating this book for 2021, the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution,
Hmm.
and we're taking modern illustrators and painters, and recreating it, not only to be a historical book, but an art book. And then the idea is to take the paintings, if they're traditional, and tour, the ones that are,
Sure.
and I hope most traditional artists tour the art with the book around the nation, not only to the Greek communities or the diaspora communities of Greece, but Philhellenes, people that are, ones that appreciate and understand the history of that time.
Mm.
Historians, it'll be a cross cultural type of book.
And what did you call them?
Philhellenes, friends of
Philhellenes.
Philhellenes are the friends of the Greeks.
Philhellenes.
There's many people out there. In fact, Dorian, he's a fanatic about the ancient Greeks, and we talk often. The modern Greeks, descended from the ancient Greeks. They're different people, but there's still that there. You go out to an island, there's a villager quoting Plato. I mean, you don't find that in other countries.
That's actually kind of very interesting finding that, because that's them quoting their own culture and their own people, their
Yeah.
own language, where anybody else is like, oh, I'm, quoting something from there.
What's interesting about the Greek people is they really still have that city-state mentality back from the ancient times. Like internally, they're always fighting. If you're from the island of Andros, I'm not going to deal with someone from the island of Crete to deal with this dance or this Greek festival. But if there's an outside influence, boy, do they band together. Like when the Persians came in, they split the Spartans up. It's the Greek Revolution. They push back the Ottoman Turks with the help of other European influence. We just have that mentality, and there's such a I wouldn't call it a pressure on us, but we got 3,000 years of history that we got to live up to. So if
And
you
continue.
continue exactly, so not just art, democracy, philosophy, mathematics, so. And it's an amazing culture, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. And and it has shaped me. And also I'm not one to ever deny, but I'm very involved with my faith, my Greek Orthodox faith. And in fact, it led me to create a podcast with a Greek priest friend of mine who's way heavily into comics. So we
That's interesting.
call it Creative Blessings, and we just launched it a month and a half ago. We talk about pop culture, art, and movies, and how it relates theologically to our lives. But it's not preachy or anything. It's just two geeks talking. One happens to be a Greek priest, one happens to be an artist, and we love the medium. So, it's interesting where your career takes you. If you ever told me back when I was 21, I was going to create an artist conference to help mentor other artists, I'd be like, you're right. I mean, I hardly spoke. I was very shy. But you can see, I'm very articulate. I like to get good people together. As my wife says, you have this knack. You're like a super networker, and you like to get the right people together and create positive. And and it's probably why I married my wife. She works in philanthropy. She has her whole career. So we love giving back. We love serving. She works with the Food Bank of South Jersey, which is part of Feeding America. They serve 4 counties. We're in there packaged food at times. We're doing the Stamp Out Hunger. And it's like it's more about I look at myself as an artist, and I've had the fortune of a good career. I didn't always stay a freelance illustrator like I wanted. I went into art direction. I even went into a time where I was like supervising tech of an agency with the artist. So it's like you never know where your career is going to take you. But now, like I'm in my late 40s, I'm in a position where I can kind of help give back and focus on these projects I want to do. And the Greek book is very dear to my heart. And in fact, we have a weird connection that I just found out, 2 months ago that, an artist was looking to get involved with this kind of project. He was a Greek. And I was like, well, there we go. And there's another project out there that IDW, one of the largest independent comic book projects, just picked up. And it's about a fictitious story in the Greek Revolution about one of the figures. And it's supposed to be the model for a motion picture TV series. So I met the writer of that through one of our guests who did the cover of the graphic novel. And that graphic novel is coming out next summer. So we're looking to partner together to promote our projects. So these are the things that like happen through artistic. We have a young girl that wrote a beautiful review. She's a graduate of Moore, actually. We weren't even thinking of Moore as a venue at the time, but we had several graduates there, and she had just won the L. Ron Hubbard Golden Brush Award. This girl was 22 years old. Her art is beautiful. I mean, you can go into YouTube and see her accept the award from 3 years ago, Michelle Lockamy. And I tell people, read her review on our blog, on our website, and she sums up Artisticon so well. It's almost like I told her what to write, but it just touched my heart because it said, basically that you're diverse, you're inclusive, you're doing something that I went out of my comfort zone and tried to find myself, and it helped me.
Wow.
So, she picked up a lot from the conference, and a lot of other people. And they're like, "Why wasn't this show there?" And we have to explain what happened. But we did sponsor these other things along the way. So we're now heavily into planning and getting the guests refined and setting up the programming for the next conference at Moore. So between that and the Greek book, oh boy, very busy. But and a child who's 6 years old in baseball and wasn't, he's in basketball summer clinic and scouts, and we're in the scouts troop. So it's like, it's a lot, and but it's all worth it. And if I can just, I like that night, I just sit down with my sketchbook sometimes and just do a basic, just to keep my hand going. If I'm not working on a project for a couple of days, I always say to, young people or any art, just keep that sketchbook in hand. If you're not used to doing that, get one. I don't care if it's a crappy one from, the pharmacy or the ShopRite, just keep drawing and teach yourself. There's so many sources like your school online. If you can't afford it, there are options. So I've just completely went off on many tangents here.
Well, to sum it all up, you're working on a book about your heritage, about the Greek Revolution, and you're passionately focused on the ArtCon and bringing people together.
Absolutely.
In bringing people together, I wanted to kind of get your some input on that. A lot of artists are terrified. They're afraid of a lot of different things.
Sure.
Not just people in general, but artists sometimes can get afraid of dealing with people or connecting with people. Well, and so they feel comfortable, like just hiding away, maybe in their studio or whatever. And I wanted to ask you, because if you're, out there networking the way that you do and connecting people, you have to feel comfortable with people.
Yes.
What kind of advice would you give to a person who knows they need to connect, but are just afraid to do it?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you brought that up, because that's what we did see. There were some people, we were in southern New Jersey, across the bridge, and there's this funny thing where people don't like crossing the bridge into Jersey, like they're going into some other dimension.
Exactly. They are.
Yeah, they are really. We're really Philadelphians. We're not, southern New Jersey, we're cheesesteaks and soft pretzels. The
difference between Philly, once you cross that bridge, all of a sudden everybody's in tracksuits, and you're like, what's going on here?
Exactly. So even Michelle in her review said, I'm a wallflower. I'm kind of reserved. I was nervous the whole time. And our very casual, laid back thing allowed her to come out. And I had that. So yes, I think you've got to try to push beyond staying in your studio. It's these kind of shows, these kind of events, a LuxCon, Artisticon, there was Spectrum, there's Gen Con, there's all these cons. And I don't mean Comic Cons, I mean illustration master classes going on right now in Massachusetts. There's a different quality, a synergy, and I hate that word, but it's true. There's a synergy that comes between being a guy with another creator. You pick up things that are not necessarily aware to you. Your mind's working in different ways, and anxiety and depression, unfortunately, is prevalent in the artist community. And I've seen, I have a friend who's a psychiatrist that showed me scans of an artist's brain
Hmm.
versus an honor, and you see the areas of mood or this different color. So there is, people that really suffer from a chemical imbalance, and they if you can get help with therapy or sometimes medication, and we live in a very fast-paced, very tentative world at this point. Technology has revved things up that we're running here, running. You're in kind of an anxiety mode sometimes, and a lot of students are coming out of art school with phenomenal debt. And I'm
Yeah.
not anti-art school, but I'm anti-debt. And
Yes.
if you're not going to be able to at least get into a position that can start paying that debt, I'm not talking two jobs, one at Starbucks and one at the movie theater. You're going to be paying off debt for the rest of your life. You're not
Yeah.
going to even hit the interest. And
Truth is, a lot of that will then be passed on to your children. So you
exactly.
went to it pisses me off, and so I'll just kind of
That pisses me off too. That's why I started artistic. But and I think that's more not even I think the art school model in 10, 15 years is going to change.
it
Uh,
has to, or it's going to go out of business.
It has to. It's not going to sustain itself, even with their alumni donor. It's just not going to happen. Nobody's going to have that kind of money.
And their alumni donor who says, "Okay, I'm going to put this much money or whatever." At some point, there's loyalty, but when you know your money is going into be wasted, and I could give $100,000 to this college, or I could put $100,000 into this startup or this online venture that's really streamlining and really dedicated, like it's going to, have a greater effect. At some point, you know, the money you put, the point of putting it out there is to see the results. It's just not to, well, I went to that school.
yeah, I mean, when I came out of art school, my total tuition for 4 years, and I commuted to save money, and I was on scholarships. I paid, I think I owed like $9,000. My total tuition was 40,000 over 4 years, 42,000.
Hmm.
That's not even 1 year in some art schools now, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you go to
So it's
like
like I
RISD.
used to think, "Holy crap, how am I going to pay this back?" And then like I did it, but
Yeah, it's it's I know, like I read an article the other day where it was talking about RISD, and it said, RISD, you go there, let's say you're there for the full thing, 4 years, $250,000,
yeah,
250,000. And then what's sad is 90% of people who go to art school within 2 to 3 years after art school are no longer in the art field.
that's true. That is true. And I think, and I say this to people before, I mentored two people. One was a little older, I'd say in their late 20s, was thinking of it. I said, no, you don't want to go back to art school or the ones you're looking at for what you want to do. This is your path. And I led them to an atelier near them.
Hmm.
And it's been great for them. It's a fraction of the cost. They're learning painting and drawing. And then there was a high school student, and they were they weren't sure if they wanted to be an artist or a biophysicist. I'm like, well, that's something I can't help you with. I mean, you can maybe be a scientific illustrator, but they wound up actually going into biophysics. But the thing was, what they wanted to do. It was like, you're looking at the wrong school. They wanted this great industrial design program. I'm like, no, 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 no. This isn't the school for that. These are the schools for that. So it's also about research and understanding where you're going. And we say it's a waste of money, but sometimes, if you're going to be industrial design or an architect, sometimes these careers can pay off a little better than, for those higher tuitions. Illustration usually, and graphic design. So anybody's a graphic designer these days. You can go to a county college and get a great education in graphic design. It's really about how you employ it, what you're
Yeah.
doing. And like, someone who's going to medical school has a great chance of paying back their loans much faster, although they're large too, but much faster than an artist. Or the artist can't even put a dent in them. So I think we get not only anxiety, but we get a little bit of anger in the younger communities, and I don't blame them. There's this I'm like, they throw their hands up. What am I going to do? But I try to keep it positive. I try to say, keep pushing, get out of the studio, meet people, go to conventions, get a table. There's all sorts of, Kickstarter is amazing now for creatives. We had John Shindahede as a guest of honor. He was the former creative director for Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, and he's now with Direwolf Digital out of Denver, and he was at ThinkGeek, which was GameStop, and he was in charge of the gaming art division. And he has a side company called Art where he helps creatives, launch these successful Kickstarters. And one of them funded in 7 hours, and they asked for like $10,000, and they got 180,000.
Wow.
So there's crowdfunding is an interesting avenue for artists now, and I think it's almost 80% of comic book projects or graphic novels through Kickstarter are funded successfully.
Wow.
So yeah, it's there. Lots of things are changing in those in the independent field, and if you go up to MoCA, which is the Museum of Cartoon and Comic Art in New York, they have MoCA Fest every year, and it's really independent comic book and graphic novels, and you see a lot of great emerging talent. And I'm not talking about superhero comics. I'm talking about taking poetry or mainstream stories and turning them into visual style. So there's all sorts of avenues out there. And I as you asked me what to tell someone struggling with it, do your best to get beyond it. If it's crippling, then maybe seek out some help. But if you can't, I think, converse or at least explain your art to someone, I think it could be a detriment. Now, I mean, a lot of people work online; they work through email and text. I'm old school. I like picking up the phone. I like to, I like to, it's a different quality for me.
Yeah.
And I hate like waiting on emails. That's my worst thing. It's like, why haven't they answered me? Why haven't they answered me? It's like you get that mentality. Like, did they get my email? Are they coming to the show? It's like, so that kind of you kind of can hide behind email. Oh, I never got your email, or I never got your text. So I like to have that physical quality. I think that's why it's important. Like we did these demos. And Carl, like I said, we had Carl Potts not only at Artisticon, we brought him to Baltimore Comic Con. We brought Dorian. We brought John to Camden Comic Con to do creative entrepreneurship. So the past year and a half, we've been sponsoring. And Seth, I told you he's a trademark attorney at LuxCon. We came up with the idea with Patrick to do one-on-one legal reviews. So we paid his fee to be there. And you could sign up instead of doing a portfolio review like you normally would with the art director. You sat 20 minutes and asked, do I need to be an LLC? This guy infringed on my artwork. What do I do? How do I want a trademark or do I want an IP? So any of those questions in 20 minutes would be answered. Then he said, if you want to retain me, or I'll just send you referral to another attorney. So we also are heavy on the business side of our Artisticon. Like the next one, I'm bringing in Seth to speak on several things, my CPA, a financial advisor, and help people understand, you may have a lot of debt, but maybe put $5 a week away in an IRA. You'll be surprised how that builds up. Things like that.
True.
Yeah. So,
and it's interesting. I started doing that, and 10% of everything that comes in, just putting it to the side in the savings.
absolutely.
And someone said something about me the other day, and I was like, man, that's true. And then I stopped to think, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, that's not true, because I totally forgot I have this money that I stored away, right? And it's kind of neat because it like when you do things like that, even just little ones, one of the factors is the physical buildup that you have, but then also the mental and emotional ones that kind of help change the way that you're thinking about certain things in life, or the way that you think about yourself.
Sure.
Um, but Chris, I want to ask you. I want to ask you a question in terms of your Greek heritage.
Sure.
Um, my first my first job was doing caricatures when I was 9 years old, but my first like laborious job or whatever was working in a Greek restaurant.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
And you survived.
very strangely, you know why I survived? It's kind of really weird. Uh, I loved it. I the owner had two sons and a daughter, and
Mhm.
he treated me like a son.
That's great.
Like when people would like, if someone said something stupid about me, like I remember this one day I walked in and this one waitress was harassing me, like she was saying something dumb or whatever. And then she's like, "Oh, I better not say that. I'll get fired." Right. And I guess like something like the owner was like, "You leave the boy alone," right? Like, or you don't have a job. And it was crazy. So once his daughter had her sweet 15, 16 type of party,
Huh?
and so all these people came in from Greece and this and that, and he asked if I would help out with the party, so I went down to help out, and like they all thought I was, "Oh, you one of Jimmy's boys," and I'm like, "No, but I sure don't mind pretending I am today. How
Well,
you
you really,
doing, Grandpa?"
you really
I
are.
don't know.
You really were Jimmy's boy. I mean, he doesn't matter your ethnicity or the Greeks are very loving. They welcome people into their families. Like you go to Greece, they are honored for people to come to their country. And it's a wonderful thing that you say that because, like, we take our 6-year-old up the street to our diner. It's called the Jersey Diner,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he's very extroverted at this age, and they love him. And he's like the mayor of the diner. But he comes in, he
Nice.
sees the waitress he wants. It's a family atmosphere, and I'm glad to hear that you've had that experience. I mean, my father was not in the food business directly. He was an executive for Philip Morris, the tobacco company. But my mother's uncles owned a diner uh, back in the '60s, not far from here. And then they did real well. And in the early '40s, they sold it for good money, and they moved to Florida and retired early. And that diner kept on with other families. And unfortunately, the diner businesses have a lot. They're struggling because of all the franchises of, like, Chili's and On the Border and all these other big restaurant chains, and it has hurt them. But that's their bread and butter for for the restaurant division.
Hmm.
And the Greeks are entrepreneurial, and for some reason the East Coast is very centrally food oriented. You go out to the Midwest, the Greeks own gas stations. You go out to the West Coast,
Oh,
they
really?
own other different businesses. And I'm actually on the board of directors of the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia.
Hmm.
So we have a very unique community of what we call the Delaware Valley of Philly. And it's like I joined this group and I love it because, like, there was this form of music called rebetiko, and it was the underground arts music in Europe in the time of the teens and 20s. It was the drug culture music. It was like folk meets Greek music meets the blues. And it was outlawed in Greece and other countries like more Eastern Europe. And it came to America. And there were three hubs. There was Camden, New Jersey, New York, and Chicago. And we found out this year the first Rebetiko recording was down in RCA Victor in Camden, New Jersey in 1918. We've dispelled the history of New York, where they claim it's the first recorded music ever in New York in the 20s. So now we have to rewrite the Greek history in America. So things like that are just to get my juices flowing. I love history. I love to learn things like that. And I'm glad that you had that experience with that gentleman. I mean, he obviously was a good person. He valued his employees, and luckily, I've known many Greeks, who own restaurant business, and they're lucky that they just look at their workers as just an extended family. Some are, you got the rotten apple and a few, and you would never want to work for them. But for the
His
most,
wife was more like
yeah,
that.
okay.
She was the cold one. He was a
My
little more like,
grandfather, I never knew my mother's father. He died 4 years before I was born. He had many restaurants and businesses, and people come up. say, "Oh, your grandfather, I loved him. He treated me so well. The things he did for me, it's just amazing to still hear that. How many years later, and you
That's
know,
cool.
yeah.
So let me ask you this last question. Since we're talking about restaurants and Greek restaurants, talk to me about some Greek food, man.
Hmm. Oh,
What do you like to?
I love my Greek food.
I'm sure you do.
Well,
And you live close enough that my prayer is that I'll love your Greek food as well.
there you go. Yeah, I've got the lamb down pat, the Easter lamb. We cook lamb for Easter, and I got my mom's recipe pretty
Yeah,
down pat.
talk to me about that because I love lamb, but I don't think I've ever actually. I might have cooked it like once, but it wasn't like
Well,
uh,
you
real
take
cooking it.
yeah, you take a leg of lamb,
Uh-huh.
and the key is to marinating it for 24 to 48 hours. What you're
Ah,
doing
that's
is
smart.
you're putting little gashes in the lamb with a
Mm-hmm.
knife, and you take a mixture of oregano, minced onion, garlic, salt and pepper, and lemon, and you're filling the pockets of these gashes, and
Mm-hmm.
then you bathe it in lemon. I mean, you take like 20 lemons and you just bathe it, and
Besides the taste, what does the lemon do to the lamb?
it
Like to the
takes
meat?
that muttony taste away from it.
Ah,
That
gotcha.
that really great Greek flavor, I call it Mediterranean.
Yes,
It doesn't have that. Like if you eat lamb from like an English restaurant or from the Isles,
it's gonna be
it's got
greasy.
that. Yeah, it's greasy, muttony. That's why I never like lamb chops too much unless they were Greek style, like in a diner. It's fatty, and
Yeah.
basically that does away with it. And what's great is if you take the potatoes and you bathe the potatoes in that stuff around the lamb and you marinate it and then you cook it, the potatoes take on the flavor of that lamb. It's like the most glorious thing ever. So,
Wow.
yeah. And then, I love spanakopita and teropita, which is the phyllo dough, either with the cheese, the three cheeses mixed,
Mm-hmm.
or spinach. Um, I've got lemon soup, which is an egg drop lemon soup. It's like egg.
Really?
Yeah, and oh God, there's so moussaka and pasticcio. Now, pasticcio is the Greek lasagna. It doesn't have
Okay.
to, some put tomato, but the traditional Greek recipe that I know, they create a bechamel sauce, which is like a cream sauce on the top of the layered macaroni, and it has meat, Greek meat sauce inside. And then you have moussaka, which is the same thing but with eggplant. In it. There's just so many great Greek recipes, and they a lot of it too. Being that some of my family's from Asia Minor, my grandfather was a Greek from my mother's side from Constantinople,
Hmm.
modern Istanbul. So you have that Asia Minor influence of the Turkish, which is very similar in the Middle Eastern,
Mm-hmm.
kind of intertwined with Greek cuisine. I mean, it really started in Greece, but then it spread out. To those other countries, Lebanon and Syria. They're very similar cultures in their foods. And, everybody says baklava. Well, Syria has a version of baklava. Turkey has a version of baklava. The Greeks have their baklava, and then, there's the fried dough. Every country I know in the world has some sort of fried dough.
Exactly.
You put me in front of fried dough, God forbid. It's like we have lucumadas, which is fried little dough balls with honey. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can't go wrong there. You might have constipation for a week, but
I'm not sure which is better, the the food itself or the way that you say these words, because
yeah.
it's like,
Oh yeah, the Greeks, man. We just went to a Greek festival last weekend, and there's 13 parishes in our region, and this is the time of year for most of them to have their festivals. Some are like a festival with the Greek food and tours of the church and what Orthodoxy is about. Some have the carnival rides. Ours is in the fall. We're a very big parish in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and we have ours in October because our parish name is St. Thomas. So
hmm,
they celebrate the feast day of St. Thomas in October. So that's when we have our festival. We draw in about 20,000 people over the weekend.
wow.
Wilmington, Delaware just had theirs. Theirs is like, I don't even know how to explain. It's so huge. It's like a 10 block party. I mean, it's
Well, I
massive.
know how they do it. They say we're having a Greek festival and a family reunion,
Yeah, there you go.
and there it is.
A lot of people say how cliche the big fat Greek wedding movies are. And they are like exaggerated, but there's a lot of truth to those movies too. And I think they get to the crux of the Greek spirit, the kephi. The kephi means their spirit, and we
Yeah.
have what we call philotimo.
About-
Philotimo is not something you can't translate. It's a personal honor, and the Greeks are very big on that. And I think that has helped me through my career, all through my life. And it's my personal honor that I've been given this gift. I feel from God that I must do my best with it, and that's how I look
And
at
how
it.
do you say that word?
Philotimo.
So it means love of something. But
Love of one's honor. That's the E. That's the
okay.
closest. It's almost not translatable. It really isn't. It's beyond honor. It's your psyche. It's your.
Well, could it be just love of oneself, but not in a narcissistic way?
Right. Like
Yeah,
you wouldn't. It's almost. It would be that you're not going to do something against your person. You would do something that's dishonorable to dishonor yourself as well.
yeah. And spell that for me.
It's Philotemo, philotimo. Did I spell that right? Right.
EMO
I have to write it. I never do well.
T
Philotemo. Philotemo, philotemo.
That's interesting.
It's like the
Spanish. You
it's like
say
the Greek. It's like the Greek movie. You want the give me any word. I give you the root of the word.
Exactly. When I saw that part, I was like, I think I'm kind of Greek somewhere in me. That in the Windex, of course.
Well, you never know. Alexander conquered the known world back then. I probably have Spanish, and you have Greek blood in you, and we're all
something. And I know it's interesting. I remember when I was in college, I was talking to this girl, and she came from a Greek family. Actually, I believe they came from Crete.
Oh yeah, well, it's from my
really?
generations back. 600 years back, we were from Crete, and then my father's family wound up in Athens for the last 300-400 years.
Wow, I like how you say that like it was like yesterday.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris. On that note, I'm gonna say great conversation, man. You're making me super, super hungry. And how can people get connected with you?
Best thing to do is just go to artisticon.org, artistacon.org, info@artisticon.net. They can go to my personal website, chriskotsakis.com. But it's best to go through Artisticon. That's where most of my dealings are right now. And I'd love for people to come out. We have a very affordable rate and students get in very, very cheap. And you can come for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days when the next show comes around. And we promise to up our game this year and have some great guests. I will be. I'm going to start another blog and website for the Greek book soon. We're kind of in the planning phases. We got 3 years. That doesn't mean much. 3 years goes by so fast. So, that's the best way to reach me. I'm on Instagram. Artisticon's on Instagram as well as Facebook. We're Twitter or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if we talk again, we can go more into the crux of art. I think I just took it on a like, what have I been working on? And that just went off on a weird tangent. I'm working on many things.
Indeed. Yeah. So, with the Artisticon, if you're doing the mentorship there and you're bringing people in, like to do their portfolio reviews and, like you said that you had a lawyer friend who was giving legal advice type of, scenarios. Let's talk because I would love to come in, and, and gives, and take a look at people's approach on composition and design.
Awesome.
That's where my value is.
Well, you studied. I think someone. I don't know who told me, but did you study under Myron Barnstone?
I did. I met Myron when I was about 17.
Okay.
And it was weird. Like after I went to college, my one of my big goals in life was to become one of his friends. And it took me 14 years, but I achieved it. And I'd go over, hang out at his house, um, and it was he was such a cool guy, very very cool guy. And and so then I got to go back and study with him years later.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then I was helping him sell his video course, and that's kind of when we really became very close.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I think it was Dorian. It's funny. I, I don't really ask anybody their last names because I'm not good with saying people's names. So we rarely bring it up. I just thought you had a cool one, and then when you said it was Greek, it made sense, and that kind of went there. But I'm looking at Dorian's last name, and I'm like, why does that look familiar? And like went through the whole interview and never once connected that he was Boris's son, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And,
He's Boris's blood son. Yeah.
yeah, and so it was just like, and then I'm like, hey Dorian, you're Boris's son. And he's like, yep. And I just thought that that spoke a lot because he was being his own man, he was not.
Yes, I
And I
admire that.
thought, yeah, and I was like, wow, that's really really cool.
And his work is
Yeah.
amazing.
You know what was interesting? I did not realize he was Boris's son. And one of the things that I often, when I was growing up in around the Barnstone Studios, was there was some work there because Boris studied there as well, and some of his things were in there. And some people would complain and they would say, well, some of the artists that leave the studios, their work is too stiff,
Mhm.
right? And Dorian was saying that he always wanted to go to the studios, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And not realizing whose son he was, I said, honestly, your work has a certain magic to it, a certain grace to it that I almost feel that if you would have gone, you would have so focused on that approach that it would have stiffened your work to the point like what makes his work beautiful now may
Right.
have never actually blossomed out of it, right? And I just thought it was. And then when I found out he was Boris's son, I was like, oh my gosh, like how almost prophetic what I was saying to him was spot on, and not even realizing who I was speaking to.
Right. Right.
And so but yeah, I mean the I studied there. Someone told me who studied with him, and then they started studying with me years later. They said, the approach that the studios did was very Freudian, right? It was like if if what Myron was bringing to the world was what Freud brought to the world, what I bring to the world is what Carl Jung brings to the world.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, and so I bring the structure, but then on top of it, I bring the storytelling and the why, and even that little more of that invisible spirituality to it. So it's just not how you do things, but it's really understanding why it actually works and then how to manipulate those things.
Was that Dorian? I don't know. I didn't get to listen to your
How
podcast.
dare you? You didn't listen to
Not yet. Not yet. I
You
will.
call him your friend. Oh my goodness.
But he always, and I don't know if you touched upon because he brings up Young a lot. I like the one he always says, people don't have ideas, ideas have people.
Yes, he said that, and that floored me, man.
I love that. Brings that up. That is
Yeah,
so true.
yeah, beautiful. So, as we leave, since you left on a great quote from, Dorian would say, as a Greek, what's a Greek quote that you would like to leave with us? And I want you to say it in Greek if you can. If not, that's okay.
Ooh, boy,
That's a double challenge.
that's a double check. Well, I'm in Greek. Trying to think one of my favorite quotes. Um, well, I could go the ancient Greek route, or trying to think of a modern Greek quote. Um,
You got
uh,
20 seconds to pick it. Not even 20. You got 7 seconds to pick it.
how about Plutarch? Um, Neither blame or praise yourself, and the whole life of a person or a man is but a point in time, and enjoy it.
Wow. Do you even know how to say that in Greek?
Not that my Greek is rusty. So I
That's cool.
understand.
That's cool. But that was beautiful, man. That was awesome. All right, cool, Chris. Talk to you soon, man.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Anytime. Enjoyed it.
Cool. Be well.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Delisha van Deventer. I am from Gauteng in South Africa. I am a landscape artist. I'm currently doing the Core 80 at the Academy of Composition. This course has had an invaluable impact in my life, into what my art should look like and how I should be presenting my art to the art world. When I was challenged with what it means to interpret and read and analyze the old masters, I found myself starting to read their thoughts and the way they put certain objects in strategic places, the way their bodies would line up and lean in a certain direction, and why certain elements were lined up. All of these were so beautifully composed and strategically designed to fit into a story so that when the viewer looks at the painting, they are mesmerized and the energy of the piece draws them into the story. As an artist, I will be applying these principles so that my art can have that wow factor and go to another level. I highly recommend this course to all aspiring artists, especially amateur artists, accomplished artists, and as well as gallery owners.
In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com. In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.